Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good afternoon. You're with me, Mazina Ismail, in this program, Shaping Tomorrow. And Alhamdulillah, Shaping Tomorrow is back this week to share with you more updates, where we know that on Shaping Tomorrow for the last 8 seasons, we've been discussing on a range of issues from various standpoints for the purpose of our collective advancement in the future, such as the intellectual, moral, and civilizational, the historical, and the contemporary, where we attempt to elicit the ways of thinking and doing which are beneficial for us to consider, as well as to discern certain pitfalls which we can avoid, inshallah. But with me today, usually your host for Shaping Tomorrow, this week we bring Shafiq Burhanuddin as our guest to share on the latest, where we know, or for your information, maybe, Shafiq, we are going to bring in retrospect of your recent sojourn to Germany. Perhaps we can start, or we can begin with your purpose of the trip, the landmark event which you attended last week, correct?
Yes, thank
So
you, Mas.
firstly, maybe how are you doing after you're back from Germany?
Alhamdulillah, feeling great. Just that, just like anyone, I suffer from the jet lag. But
Mm.
the memories of my sojourn remains in my mind and my soul, and hopefully from there, we can share something useful for our audience.
Alhamdulillah, great to know. So welcome back, and now we would like to know, once again, your purpose of the trip, and what do you gain from your visit to Germany? Which
Yes.
part of Germany, first of all?
So mainly we were in Frankfurt,
Mm.
which is the financial capital of Germany and one
Mm-hmm.
of the financial capitals of Europe.
Right.
From in Germany arose many sort of figures as well. If
Mm-hmm.
you've heard of the Rothschild family, the very powerful
Yes.
financial family, they apparently came from Frankfurt, and
Mm.
there is a museum dedicated to their
Family.
legacy.
Yeah, legacy.
Yes, and actually it's a Jewish museum, but it's built
Mm-hmm.
on their residence, and of course there are many banks as a result. Although apparently the Rothschild family is no longer as influential as they were in the past, many
Right.
banks, and it's a very modern city.
Mm-hmm.
Although they have a lot of what they had in earlier times were destroyed because of World War II.
Okay.
That's a lot of what of the landscape that you see today. Is a lot of it reconstructed post World War II. But reason we're there is because of
Mm-hmm.
the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is one of
Okay.
the largest, or if not the largest, book fair in the world. So much,
Mm.
if you don't mind, if you could share the slides that I've prepared for the
Sure.
benefit of our audience on the Facebook or live.
Sure.
Um,
Okay, would you like to take control of the presentation?
yep.
Yes, please.
So
Floor is yours.
so
Yeah.
so although I titled this session as "Lessons from Germany," it's
Mm-hmm.
far from exhaustive or comprehensive. But what I have sought or attempted right from the beginning of this sojourn, although it was we went there for a very specific mission, but
Mm-hmm.
I attempted to try to understand as much as I could
Yes.
of the achievements and the advancement of Germany for our own sort of reflection and as well as reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So this book fair actually has a very long history in
Ah,
Frankfurt and Germany, and history of the world. It's been there for the last maybe 600-700 years. It's been
wow.
present. It has a long tradition. And
Okay.
there is even a book dedicated to this subject about the history of the Frankfurt Book Fairs. I'm
Mm.
sharing this particular slide.
Okay.
Excuse me. So,
Mm-hmm.
like one of the anecdotes of in this book is stated that even like for instance, the King of England would assign a representative to attend this Frankfurt Book Fair to acquire a large number of books for the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of I believe it was the Oxford University Library,
Okay.
and for those who may not be familiar, actually the Frankfurt Book Fair is not like any other fair in most places, in the sense that many book fairs tend to have, like for example in the KL International Book Fair, it's just a book fair for the public where they just sell books. But the
Okay.
likes of Frankfurt Book Fair is a trade fair primarily,
Mm-hmm.
meaning to say it is where those in the publishing industry,
Okay.
such as authors themselves, distributors, publishing
Okay.
houses,
Mm-hmm.
and so many people associated with the publication industry. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
Would convene on an
Mm-hmm.
annual basis and try to secure deals, build relationships, build networking
Right.
uh, for potential collaborations and partnership,
Mm-hmm.
in various regards.
Mm-hmm.
So hence why it evolved in the modern times in the 20th century. In the modern century, in the modern edition of this book fair, is where uh, is where the current sort of concept took shape. So it's been present for the last 78 years. In recent times, it's been funded by the Ministry of Culture and Media of the Federal State of Germany itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but there is an organization, a German organization, which runs it, which is not directly funded by the organization, but I believe at some point the German federal government took ownership of it because seeing how significant and strategic this book fair has become.
Mm-hmm.
So, like this year alone, uh, there has been exhibitors, like 4,000 exhibitors from 95 countries. But even then, apparently this is half of the initial of the figures before the
Yeah.
pandemic. So there would be much more exhibitors and representatives from various countries before the pandemic. So apparently this one is considerably low considering the circumstances in the world today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is, aside from the wheeling and dealing side of
Yeah.
the book fair, where people try to sell their rights
Yeah.
or purchase rights for publication in a certain region or in a certain country. There's also one of the key features
Yeah.
of this event is there's like forums and talks like
Mm-hmm.
concurrently during the 6 day affair of
Is it
this.
something that we see on the screen
Yes,
where we
so
have Richard?
this
Yeah.
one, yes, the one on the bottom right
Mm.
is one
Yeah.
example of how
Mm.
the setting of this forum and discussion is. It's very laid back, very
Yeah.
sort of relaxed,
Right.
and they have discussions on a range of topics.
Mm.
But what I found was, uh, before I go to the next slide, is that
Okay.
it they with all the with aside from the very commendable organization and achievement of the federal government and the organizers, I feel
Mm-hmm.
that more could be done in terms of in the content of the discussion itself. I've not scrutinized the entirety 78 years or 75 years of this event, but when I went there, I felt
Mm-hmm.
it's too one-dimensional in the sense that it's too focused on certain political or social or business issues.
Okay.
I felt it could be much more, considering it's a global international book fair, and considering there's like a great deal of global tension between
Mm-hmm.
civilizations and between adherents of world religions, in particular Islam in the West. I feel
Okay.
there isn't a real substantial discussion trying to bridge this,
Mm.
these issues, or this how to address or make this situation, try to
Mm-hmm.
uh, how to make the situation sort of better.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
a
But
lot of
speaking
it.
of that,
Yes.
how do you
Mm.
see the participants of the book fair, be it the exhibitors or
Mm.
also, the public masses? Is it
Yes,
international or just yeah?
it is very diverse, in
Mm.
true to their ambitions of the organizers. They want to make it as diverse as possible. Except
Mm-hmm.
for political reasons, they have excluded Russia as
Okay.
well as Iran. So these two very large or powerful countries in the world have been excluded for political reasons.
Okay.
Apparently, Iran is being excluded because there's some challenges in terms of their visa. I'm not sure how true the report is, but in any case, they
Yeah.
decided. Initially, they were on the list, and they were not. They did not
Mm-hmm.
attend at all. Russia was
Mm-hmm.
never in the list to begin with, because of the sentiment in Europe, because they see what is happening between Russia and Ukraine is an aggression on the part of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to go into that. It's
Of course, yes.
embroiled in the
Yeah.
problems, but it's very diverse, no doubt.
Uh-huh.
China, to be fair, China's pavilion is there. So like ours, like Malaysia has its own pavilion
Mm-hmm.
as well, and several other countries, Muslim countries also were there: Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Oman,
Great, great. Mm-hmm.
UAE, right?
Yes, excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's quite
Mm-hmm.
diverse in that sense. But my
Uh-huh.
my sort of reservation, I feel how it could particularly improve is
Mm.
using, because it could be much more. It could be much more, excuse me, much more profound in terms of that platform, because you
Yeah.
have convened all of us there, but
Yeah.
we're not really genuinely talking to each other, because the Western uh, publications or publishing
Mm.
houses in Western countries tend to talk each other, because there's more commonalities in terms of their literatures and in the issues that they write about. So for some
Mm.
reason, it's like they're still just talking to each other, like everyone's still talking to each other. And
Mm.
so I feel that there's room for improvement, but knowing the German history and tradition, they are capable of that. So that's why I feel
Yeah.
that excuse me,
Yeah.
I feel like this is something that um, uh, we should look into,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, in this particular episode. Mas.
I see. So I guess that is one of the lessons, probably the first one that you share, that you learn from this book fair. I mean,
Mm,
what you derive from it. Uh,
yeah.
and is there any other things that you would like to share, also recommendations based on your trip?
So because based on my observations and what I said just now, although there is diversity, there seems to be a
Mm-hmm.
recognition to have a very conscious attempt to have diversity in terms of the representations of the countries and
Right.
groups of people. But then I think this notion diversity must be much more comprehensive, because I think a lot of maybe those amongst the organizers or in the international community, they're not quite aware of what the scholars, quite a lot of scholars in various parts of the world speak of in terms of different worldviews, in that diversity in that regards, because you can have diversity, but you may still have the domination or the hegemony of one type of perspective or worldview dominating the conversation.
Mm,
So I think
okay.
this is a very subtle thing that uh, uh, many platforms are not conscious of. Not just this,
Right.
but I think many platforms, even in Malaysia sometimes.
Sure.
So because when you talk about different worldviews, that's where the Muslim, those from the Muslim countries or from China could actually articulate their viewpoint on very foundational issues, which the West may take for granted of those institutions, and those learned in the West may take for granted of. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. So secondly, I felt that um, looking at this very strategic sort of event and activity,
Yeah.
government perhaps, although this time Malaysia under the Ministry of Education and through the
Mm-hmm.
initiative also of the Malaysian Book Council, Majlis Buku Kebangsaan Negara Malaysia,
Yeah. Yeah.
they did really great job representing
Mm-hmm.
Malaysia there. I have to commend them and their team for doing such
Mm-hmm.
a marvelous job representing Malaysia, the Malaysian Pavilion, at the Frankfurt Book Fair for many years now. Apparently, I mean, although this is the first time I've been there, but they've done this for many years. And
Mm-hmm.
this year, I saw for myself that they had Malaysian students from the art school coming
Mm-hmm.
there with their drawings and sketches. You can see there the drawings, some
Amazing.
of the, yeah, and also
Mm-hmm.
they're doing like dance, traditional Malay dance performance. And I saw many people from different parts of the world coming together and witnessing that, and also enjoying some Malaysian food which we
Yeah.
prepared,
Right.
and people were hanging around our booth just sitting and eating and chatting. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
it's all about. It's like soft, sort of soft diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, but then I feel we could do even better. I think we could take it a notch up in the sense that because we have we're talking about cultural diplomacy, right? Everyone in the world is talking about the importance of cultural diplomacy
Mm-hmm.
in international affairs. I feel that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government and maybe the public sector could come in and
Mm-hmm.
and fund such initiatives even more, fund such activities even more, support it
Yeah.
even more, and get our best sort of publications, best authors. Although there were many good publication and authors that we highlighted,
Okay.
those from the independent publishing industry as well as from of course the public Malaysian industry. But I think we could do better if there was more funds to try
Yeah.
to position Malaysia as a sort of a noteworthy
Mm-hmm.
voice
Mm-hmm.
in civilizational dialogue, in thought leadership, because I think we have a lot to contribute in this arena, like how we
Mm.
have been trying to do at the Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia. So,
Fantastic.
and I feel
Yeah.
we have the capacity
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
have a very intelligent dialogue with anyone in
Right.
the world, including the
Right.
West. But
Right.
so we shouldn't stop just to exhibit, present ourselves very beautifully, which we have done tremendously well. But we could do more than that in platforms like
Mm-hmm.
that, under the banner of cultural diplomacy and civilizational dialogue, which is also enjoined by Islam. Get to know one another,
Yeah.
ta'arafu,
Yeah.
and really get to know one another and engage
Right.
one another, and to appreciate God's diversity in the world.
Right. I'm assuming this book fair is an annual thing.
It is an annual thing, so it's been
Mm-hmm.
running for the last 78 years.
Mm.
And I mean, although it's a sort of participation has decreased because this is the first time they've held it after the pandemic. So they did
Right.
not have it during the pandemic for the last 2 years. So they had it
Of course.
online apparently. So, but
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, it has remained the most important and biggest book fair, because all of the biggest publication houses, like from the Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Yale, from the
Mm.
US, all the biggest names you can imagine, Brill, and so on, were
Yeah.
there, including, and not only that, but also like cultural institutions, I think there was the Maktoum Foundation from the UAE, the very
Mm-hmm.
wealthy family of
Mm-hmm.
Dubai, and there was the Saudi Aramco, the oil company,
Yeah.
which created their own cultural institution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just limited to publication. It's like a whole, it's almost like a cultural affair where countries
Mm-hmm.
and nations want to exhibit their cultural strength and offerings and gifts to the world, kind of thing. So very
Yes, of
interesting.
course.
Yeah.
But now that you're mentioning on cultural affairs,
Yeah.
would you like to share if there is any observations, on culture in Germany during your brief
I
time?
think in particular, what is most interesting with regards to German culture is their culture of knowledge, culture of learning.
Okay.
And it seems to me, from my limited time there, because I did prior research before going there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm quite certain it's quite there. This a certain type of German cultural learning, which as a result is translated into their excellence in various fields, especially the technical and professional fields, which the Germans are very much known for their
Mm-hmm.
German products, right? Mercedes Benz and whatever and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think there is a prior step that they took for centuries that led
Mm-hmm.
them to that excellence in the worldly sense. One of
Okay.
them is that the fact that they recognize or they honor their luminaries, their great figures in learning,
Okay.
such as Johann Wolfgang von
Quite.
Goethe,
Yeah.
who died in 1832. This is like 200 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how they honor their luminaries like Goethe is they name institutions after him. Firstly, not one institution, but at least two major institutions were named after him. Number one is the Goethe Institute, which is the
Mm-hmm.
cultural institute of the federal state of Germany, and can be
Okay.
found in 100 other countries in the world. It's like,
Including us.
including our
Inc-
country, they have one in
Yeah.
Malaysia. It's
Yeah.
something like the British Council of the United Kingdom, something like Yunus Emre of the Turkish
Right.
state. And I think China has the Confucius Institute, but
Yeah.
Germany, they are proud of Goethe. this cultural intellectual icon of Germany, who just lived 200
Mm.
years ago. Unlike Confucius, who lived 2,000 years ago, but this man who just lived 200 years ago, and they recognize him as one of their greatest sons
Yeah.
of learning, of knowledge, and they name him, and they want the world to know about him. And also they have a university, like a top university in Frankfurt, named after him, a Goethe University. And also the house where he grew up in Frankfurt, they also
Mm-hmm.
preserved that. Although, like in many other buildings, it was bombed and destroyed during World War II, but they rebuilt it based on the original sketches, and try to reconstruct it as much as close as possible as how it was, including his books, his excuse me, his library.
Yeah.
And it's available for the public to access. I would say it's one of the must go places if you were ever in Frankfurt, to get to know this intellectual giant of Germany, that shaped their culture, actually, this man.
Mm.
Because for those who don't know, it's through Goethe, because he's a novelist, he's a poet, he's a scientist,
Mm.
he's a politician, he's a polymath, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of his poetry, it influenced sort of the greatest classical musicians in history, like Beethoven, Mozart, and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. Right? And
Yes.
just from and many, and it influenced many other things as well. Excuse me. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think not many by now it's much more known, although it may not be as known. I assume in the Muslim world that Goethe also had a very positive sort of perception of Islam, and what Islam has to offer to the world. Like
Okay.
apparently, because during his time, the sort of the negative perception of Islam is reaching a very high level through other sort of intellectuals in Europe. But he gave a sort of a counter narrative, a counter sort of
Mm.
portrayal of the Prophet Muhammad SAW and on Islam, as
Mm-hmm.
well as of the sort of the intellectual legacy of the Muslims. He was
Mm-hmm.
it was through, I think, through one of his teachers, he got to know this great poet from Persia, Hafiz,
Yes.
who lived about 700 years or 400 years before him, 500 years
Yeah.
before him. But
Mm-hmm.
he was so inspired by Hafiz, he wrote this book in German, but retaining that Persian title, Diwan, basically,
Yeah.
and writing this book I'm displaying on Facebook Go Live. It's
Mm-hmm.
West. He titled it the West Eastern Diwan, or West Ostlicher Diwan.
Yeah.
By Goethe. So it's his own sort of poetic sort of text. And but what I suppose what he tried to do is to show that there is a cultural proximity between the East and the West. So
Yes.
it's quite remarkable,
Mm.
because this should be the basis of our continuous dialogue, because if there's no dialogue between us, and I
Yeah.
think luminaries like him have already paved the way, have already sort of established the grounds for us to continue that dialogue
Right.
further. Because if we don't have that dialogue, then extremism is bound to happen, misunderstanding is bound to happen, hatred
Yeah.
is bound to happen. So I think it's our collective obligation, both from the East and the West, to retrieve this kind of work, this kind of luminaries, the work
Mm-hmm.
of these luminaries, and try to build on that further, and replicate that in different platforms, including places like the book fair. And interestingly, in connection to uh, Gu- Goethe University, also is where you could find this very prominent historian of science of Turkish
Yeah.
descent by the name of
Mm.
Fuat Sezgin, who just died in 2018. Fuat
Okay.
Sezgin was given, when he died, he was given a state burial by the Turkish government. I remember seeing President Erdogan himself
Mm.
among those carrying his coffin, upon his death.
Yeah.
Fuat Sezgin worked for a very long time in Frankfurt University, in this place here, this neighborhood, a very 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 nice sort of high class neighborhood in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
It was converted into a kind of small institute for the history of Arabic and Islamic sciences. So for those who may not be aware with Sezgin, the late Professor Sezgin, may Allah bless him, is that
Mm.
he studied many manuscripts, hundreds if not thousands of manuscripts in Arabic and in the Muslim languages of the scientific tradition, the natural sciences and so on. And then he compiled it, did a lot, hundreds of publications on it to sort of
Mashallah. Mhm.
yeah, to document it, so that it's easy for researchers to track
Success.
and
Yeah.
access those materials. And then
Yeah.
from there, another major achievement of his is that he led the efforts to reproduce a lot of the inventions and the tools and the devices, the scientific devices of the Muslims in those manuscripts, into a replica like what you can see in one of those
Yeah.
pictures on the screen right now.
Mhm.
So when he
Okay.
did that, basically in that kind of climate, this is like the late 20th century in
Mhm.
the West,
Yeah.
it sort of not only filled a major gap in terms of scholarship or what people sort of understood about history of science, but also it perhaps changed the perception of those in the West about Muslims as well and the Muslim civilization, because by then, by 20th century, it's still not widely recognized the Muslim contributions to the sciences and technology
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Could be partly deliberate to you know to ignore or to forget about this contribution of the Muslims. But so thus uh, the contribution of Professor Seskin is so immense, and
Mm.
this institute is still there in
Mm.
Frankfurt. And I was fortunate during the Frankfurt Book Fair. I was in touch
Yeah.
with one of their staff,
Yeah.
and one of the staff who worked with Professor Seskin for the last 30 years, 30, 40 years,
Mashallah.
Mr.
Mhm.
Amawi, he was kind enough to meet me at the Frankfurt Book Fair and
Yeah.
talk about what's happening right now with this institute.
Yeah.
I tried to go there, but because due to limitation of time, I was unable to. But he welcomed Malaysian delegation, Malaysian visitors in the future. If any,
Inshallah.
yeah, inshallah, to if any of us are there. But for those in Turkey as well, those who have visited Turkey, you can also see the replica of his efforts in a
Mm.
dedicated museum in Istanbul as well. So, but
Right.
remember, this all started from a work in
Yeah.
Frankfurt University, in Goethe University in Frankfurt. So I
Yes.
think these are some of the commendable things about the Germans' culture of
Mm.
knowledge. You know,
That's amazing. Yeah.
aside from their recognition of their own luminaries, Goethe, which I feel the Muslim nations could do better, could do more
Mhm.
in terms of recognizing and remembering their great scholars and great luminaries, and and memorialize and their contributions by naming institutions after them. I don't think we are doing
Mhm.
that enough in Malaysia.
Yes. Yes.
Or many Muslim countries. It's like we only remember them in books, but not that
Mhm.
we don't draw from their genius, from their contributions as a source of inspiration for future generations.
Yes.
To me,
Yes.
this is particularly inspiring when the
Yes.
Germans do that, and this is just one example, right?
Mhm.
The case of Goethe. There's also another case which I don't think we have the time now.
Oh, we can have a
So
second episode speaking on this, Shafiq.
yeah, inshallah.
Okay, amazing. Okay, as we said, we have come to almost the end of program.
Mm.
We want to know before we go on your hopes, or perhaps you have further observations that you would like to share in the next episode. But how would you like to tell our listeners on the inspirations that you get through this journey?
I aside from Frankfurt, which we didn't have to have enough
Yeah,
time to share, but we managed to also visit this place called Heidelberg, which is about
yeah.
50 minutes train ride from Frankfurt, and there it's still preserved, the oldest
Mm,
university in Germany, which is like almost 700-800 years old. And in
yeah.
this one is also another great example of how the culture of knowledge in Germany continues to be preserved and advanced. And because
Mm,
here uh, they've seen Nobel Prize winners, they've seen heads of state of in Germany and outside, great
yeah.
scholarship figures, including the great Muslim Pakistani intellectual poet Allama Iqbal. He had very fond memories
Yeah.
of studying in Heidelberg. But
Mm.
to your question, like uh, aspirations, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
can you say the last term again? What was your last
Yeah. The
question, please?
inspirations that you would like the listeners
Right.
to know, and also to inspire them to listen to our next episode, because there's a lot more. We haven't even covered on the knowledge culture that you gain from your observation. But
Yeah.
what would you like to tell listeners today that we will continue next week to share on, that you think important for them from your trip this time?
Yeah, I think when we go to places like this, which is
Mm.
obviously from a very different civilization, it's a Western civilization,
Yeah.
chiefly a Judeo-Christian one. You know, even today, there's a lot of contention. They don't, with regards to the German identity, they're very protective. They don't want to say Islam is part of it. It's still a big debate. Although
Okay.
apparently one of the former presidents declared that Islam has to be part of Germany, but largely I think the sentiment is a Judeo-Christian
Okay.
nation, you know. So,
Yeah.
but then they have a very rich and distinctive cultural, intellectual legacy, which we can learn from also, and
Yes.
also try to sort of aim or seek to be among the common points where we can build bridges and build harmonious relations and build sort of collective, mutual collective advancement on. Because I think the fact that uh, a country as advanced or as advanced as Germany with all their achievements, they still recognize those
Mm-hmm.
in the humanities, the luminary in the field of humanities, namely the
Mm.
likes of Goethe,
Yeah.
shows that they understand to develop is not merely in the economic, in the technological sense, but you need to have that inner development, that cultural aspect as well.
Yes.
And so much so that
Mm-hmm.
like one individual from Germany, I believe he's in the literary sort of sector. He said that this Stephen Weidner, he said that
Mm-hmm.
he even said there are, so this shows that there are individuals like this in Germany. He said that today we must maintain contact with living Islamic culture and
Yeah.
take it seriously as a partner in dialogue. If we do this with the same interest as Goethe did back in his time, we will do
Right.
it right. So I feel
Right.
that there are people in Germany who want to reach out to us, who want to
Mm-hmm.
con- to be partners in dialogue, because they themselves know if they isolate themselves or only talk to them amongst themselves in the West,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a particularly healthy and productive scenario for all
Yeah.
of us in the world and in the future. Excuse me.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
That's right.
they know, I mean, like it or not, we all are living together in this world, and we are much more closer today, uh,
Yes.
because of the connectivity. So there's even
Mm-hmm.
much more need for
Yeah.
us to resume and assume this dialogue,
Yes.
like how their own figure, like Goethe, had intended to, although he didn't have much opportunity apparently to actually meet or visited Muslim lands, but it shows that he took the trouble to try
Mm.
to really understand the other worldviews in the world, and tried to uh, you know uh, to have a positive conversation with it, and with a bigger objectives. And I feel that this is the kind of future that Muslims, young Muslims, and Muslims perhaps in the academia should pursue as well. Wallahu a'lam.
Yes. Yes. Inshallah. Well, speaking of inspiring, inspirations that you get from your trip, is it's also inspiring for others to, actually visit Germany, to
Yeah.
gain more knowledge. And as Ibn Battuta quotes, traveling leaves you speechless, then turns you into a storyteller. More stories that we will share, inshallah, next week on Shaping Tomorrow, every Sunday at 5 p.m. with Shafiq Bohanuddin. And with that, thank you very much, Shafiq, for your sharing this week. And we'll continue next week on Lessons from Germany. With me, Mazina Ismail. Thanks, and see you next week, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.